Welcome to the Explainer, okay? So today we've got a truly wild ride ahead of us. We're unpacking an ancient source text that, well, it completely upends everything we think we know about human history. The text is called The Alchemist and the Age of Giants. And let me tell you, it is absolutely fascinating. If you're into dissecting ancient lore and figuring out how early humans were actually depicted back in the day, you're gonna love this. We're diving straight into the exact claims this text makes, what they actually mean, and why they're just so incredibly captivating. Right off the bat, the material throws down the gauntlet with this exact phrase: forget everything you saw in history class. Seriously, no joke. The text literally demands that we take our standard historical timelines and our modern biological expectations and just leave them at the door. Why? Because the narrations we're analyzing today describe a time when the world wasn't just, filled with early hunter-gatherers trying to scrape by. It's described literally as a giant's playground. And the text isn't using some flowery poetic metaphor here. It is speaking in absolute, literal terms about the immense physical reality of the Earth's earliest inhabitants. 70. Just let that sink in for a second. 70. To back up its breathtaking claims about this age of the Titans, the source points to a very specific physical location. It mentions a grave located in modern-day Lebanon that measures a staggering 70 meters long. And we're not talking about a massive monument or a temple or a pyramid to honor someone. The text describes this as the actual physical resting place for a single individual person. To really wrap your head around that mind-bending scale, just think about an average human grave today. It's roughly 2 meters long? Now compare that to a massive 70-meter ancient grave. The text is literally telling us that the beings walking the earth during this age of Titans were about 35 times bigger than you or me. It's kind of hard to even visualize that level of scale, but the lore presents this not as some exaggerated campfire story, but as the actual anatomical reality of our distant past. So you're probably wondering, how does this ancient lore actually explain those immense physical traits? I mean, most people today would just write this off as pure folklore, right? But the text actually provides a fascinating biological rationale for these giants. It points to what it calls a fresh genetic pool. The whole argument here is that early humans weren't primitive or biologically inferior to us at all. In fact, it was the exact opposite. They were operating at full, absolutely uncorrupted biological capacity. And the specific details that text provides about this biological capacity, they are nothing short of awe-inspiring. We are talking about physical attributes like having bones literally like steel, which honestly makes sense because you'd need structural support like that for a massive 70-meter frame. And because of this incredibly robust, fresh genetic pool, their lifespans were unimaginably long. The narrations state they were hitting 900 years of age. It's just a completely different paradigm of what it meant to be human. But the narrative doesn't just stop at their massive physical scale. It pivots from the sheer size of these giants to a massive technological leap, and it does this by introducing a very specific historical and theological figure, Sheath, peace be upon him. The narrations take this figure and completely reframe his role in the dawn of early human civilization. Now this is the really crucial part, how he's defined here. Usually when we read ancient texts, figures like Sheath are described purely as spiritual guides, or prophets, or patriarchs. But this lore goes way further and delivers a genuine surprise. It elevates Sheath beyond just being a simple spiritual guide and explicitly defines him as the world's very first alchemist. It frames him as this industrious pioneer, a literal scientist of his time, who fundamentally understood and manipulated the physical properties of the earth itself. We're actually given very specific examples of his groundbreaking work. The narrations state that Sheath was actively extracting the Earth's deepest secrets. He wasn't just out there surviving in nature, he was mastering it through profound applied knowledge. According to the lore, he pulled gold right from the Earth, and he pulled silver from the Earth. He was pioneering early metallurgy and alchemy, sparking this massive wave of technological and material advancement for early humanity. He essentially represents the absolute peak of human industriousness in this ancient era. But as with all great stories of advancement, there's always a contrasting narrative, isn't there? While one side of humanity is out there pushing the boundaries of knowledge through Sheath's alchemical advancements, there's another completely different group living at the exact same time. The text calls them the Plains people. So while one side is out there actively harnessing the earth, the other side is experiencing this incredibly steep societal decline, getting entirely lost in what the text literally calls cheap thrills. So, who exactly were these Plains people? Well, they're defined very clearly in the source as the descendants of Kabil, and their defining characteristic wasn't innovation or alchemy or even utilizing their massive physical prowess for anything productive. No, it was their complete descent into music and distraction. The text characterizes Kabil's descendants as a society that just actively turned its back on the hard work of advancement. They chose instead to become completely consumed by entertainment and idle amusement out on the plains. Basically, they were the world's very first couch potatoes. And this leads us to what is easily the most startling, provocative claim in the entire narrative regarding exactly where these cheap thrills actually came from. See, this ancient lore doesn't just view this music and distraction as some natural, harmless human development. It describes these distractions as being, and I'm quoting directly from the text here, invented by Shaitan himself. Which forces us to ask an incredibly provocative question. Wait, did music really start as a demonic distraction tool? Now remember, we're just neutrally exploring the claims of these ancient narrations, but this is exactly what the text is suggesting. It frames the very invention of musical entertainment not as some beautiful, creative art form, but as a calculated tool of distraction, one specifically designed by a demonic entity to pull humanity away from its full potential and off the industrious, enlightened path laid out by figures like Sheath. And this brings us right to the core thematic contrast of our entire explainer today. This ancient source uses the story of alchemy versus music to illustrate a profound duality in human nature itself. On one hand, you've got the path of relentless advancement and industry, unlocking the secrets of the universe, represented by these massive early humans operating at full genetic capacity and the incredible alchemical genius of Sheath. But then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you have rapid societal decay, represented by the Plains people just totally succumbing to demonic distraction and cheap thrills. It's such a fascinating, polarizing way to view the dawn of civilization through the lens of this ancient lore. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly relevant thought to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. Are we still caught in the exact same ancient battle between true advancement and cheap distraction today? I mean, when you look around at our modern world, with all of our incredible technological potential constantly warring for our attention against an endless 24/7 stream of digital entertainment and cheap thrills, you really have to wonder. You have to wonder if the narrations about Sheaths and the Plains people aren't just a story about ancient history, but a stark warning about human nature itself. What should you take away from this? Well, perhaps it's a reminder to ask ourselves which path we're actually dedicating our own capacity to. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I highly encourage you to go check out these fascinating texts for yourself.